Hi folks, welcome back to We the People. I'm Dave Gallus on the weekly show, and it's all about getting our country squared away, finding out what the truth is. And today's subject is going to be election fraud. This will be the first part of, I don't know how many series it's going to be, because we got a lot of ground to cover about election fraud. Our special guest today is Dan Parrott. He was the infamous fellow that was tossed out of the absentee ballot election board some time ago during the election, and I wanted to find out from Dan just what was going on at that time, so he's going to give us a rundown. So Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, I'd like you to give us a little background about yourself, so let you know, or let the folks know that you're not fresh out of jail or anything like that.
Okay,
so.
Sure. Okay, well, I'm 70 years old. I've lived here in Las Cruces for about 23 years or so. My work background is engineering by trade. I have an undergraduate degree in engineering and a master's degree in engineering. I've worked with a local aerospace company for over 33 years and retired 2 years ago, and look forward to staying here as far as I can tell now.
Okay, well, I know you're a very precise person. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be running for the county chairmanship of the Republican Party, and one person I want to suggest as being a secretary with precise notes is Dan Parrott. So I have all the confidence in the world that Dan is accurate and certainly honest. So the voting process, I'm not happy with at all. As a matter of fact, the person that was running against our current county clerk, Amanda Askin, deputy clerk Lindsey Bachman, and I guess sub-deputy clerk Andy Perez.
Correct.
These people I do not trust. And so I was backing Cheryl Young, who I know is a very honest person, a very strong Christian, and she couldn't lie if she wanted to. And she knows a lot about elections. However, if our elections were true, fair, and honest, we may very well have all been elected. I was running for the state Senate in District 37, so we're not sure if we got a fair election. One of the ways to try and make sure to the public that the elections are fair is to have oversight. Dan was a certified observer, known as a challenger. So if anything was awry during the election process, or in his case, the absentee ballot counting process, he could challenge. However, there were some misconceptions, and I just want to let you folks know that until we get a voter ID, we are never going to have fair elections, and until we get our voter rolls cleared up, we are never going to have true and fair elections. Now, back in the studio, my producer is going to bring up a picture of a third world country voting. And in this picture, you will see people, and they were probably barefoot in a line. I think it was Africa that they were voting in. And these people have to have voter identification. So if you look on your screen, you should see the woman in the first picture, and she's in line. And you'll notice in her hand, she has a small card. Then the next slide you'll see will be a close-up of her voter ID with, I forget what you call it, it's a code you can scan with your phone?
It's a form of a barcode, yes.
So it's a funny-looking barcode, but that identifies this third world woman as being a voter, a bona fide voter. Now, if they can do it there and we can't do it here in the U.S., you got to wonder why, folks. I want fair and honest elections. So, okay. So, Dan, can you give us a quick overview of how the absentee ballot process goes after the absentee ballots are produced by the voter?
Okay, generally the voters can mail them back in, or they can drop them off at a drop box.
Okay.
And on the outer envelope there is a space where that if a caretaker or a blood relative, a brother, a sister, mother, father, etc., can drop those ballots back off.
So only those people,
only
a
those
blood
people.
relative or a caregiver with a note or a signature saying that they
Correct.
are a caregiver, they're the only people that can drop it off.
That's correct.
And you can't drop off a whole bunch of ballots at one time.
Not supposed to, no.
Okay, so they drop them off, and they either drop them off at the drop box, a certified drop box, or at the county clerk's office, right?
That's correct.
What happens after?
Then after they're either received in the mail or through one of these drop boxes, are collected and brought to the clerk's office, and there they remove an outer seal.
Who is they?
Someone in the clerk's office.
Now,
I really don't know who.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but in the past, we used to have observers, challengers, or watchers that would actually be involved in the process when that outer security envelope tab is removed.
I believe that is correct.
And
I have
that's what
not done it myself.
That's what I read. And you would have a person from the major parties, whether it's, well, it'd be Democrat, Republican, and if Libertarians qualified, they would all be present when that outer envelope tab is removed.
They should be, for the simple sake of being open, honest, and fair.
Right.
What would you possibly want to hide if there's nothing wrong?
If everybody wants a fair and honest election, that's exactly what should happen. You should be proud to do that. What I understand is this law that was enacted because or as a result of this COVID-19 process or COVID-19 scare, that the Secretary of State allowed the county clerk, through legislation, the legislatures had to do this, the SB 4 had to allow the county clerk's office alone remove that security tab with no oversight. But I understand that a little late, but a week after, you got the idea, I believe, that, hey, we should be watching this process because if the county clerk are corrupt, and I believe they are, if they're corrupt, they have the voters' rolls with all the voter information, including the last 4 digits of the Social Security. So they could easily write in that Social Security number.
That's a possibility, certainly.
And the Secretary of State, if she was going to follow through on, what would you say, accountability and the transparency, you were supposed to have a red pen only when you were actually allowing absentee ballots to be counted, right?
That's correct.
So I would think if the county clerk's office were going to follow the rules of transparency, they should have red pens only. But that doesn't mean much of anything. They could always sneak a pen in, but that would be a way to show some transparency. But ultimately, they should have observers, challengers that are certified to watch this process. Make sure that county clerk in her office is not doing anything crooked.
In my opinion, Dave, what really should be done, those envelopes should be brought to the processing center and the whole process be done from start to finish in one location that is in a secured building, not the county warehouse. It's got multiple entrances to it. And I sat there early in the morning. I'm an early riser. So I would sometimes arrive there at 7 o'clock. Right. And there was county workers going and coming from various doors in the building.
And they had access to where the ballots are.
That's correct. Now those ballots are in boxes that do have seals on them. But in the process of starting the processing of these absentee ballots, it was relatively easy when there was only 2 or 3 boxes.
Right.
As we got into the process, it got more difficult because the presiding judge was told that verifying the seals was outside of her scope and she didn't have to let us challengers or anyone else see them. But through the trying to be fair and honest, the judge did allow me to see them as I could. She didn't make any special effort to help me see them, but she didn't keep me from looking at them.
Well, if you can't verify the numbers on the seals on the boxes, and you can't verify that there has been no break in the chain of evidence, I would say, the ballots, if you have that warehouse unattended during the night, who's to say a person couldn't come in and change the seals and just make the same seal numbers if they were recorded? I mean, if this is open for anybody to come in, multiple doors, was it under surveillance 24 hours? Did they have police on the scene?
As far as I know, there was no security guards, no county sheriffs or deputies or anyone else monitoring the building. They do have an internal surveillance system which they used to watch what we were doing, because I know for a fact that they did get me on videotape because of an incident that we may discuss a little bit later on.
Right.
But in the process of doing this, to be open, transparent, and honest and let everyone see what's going on, these things should be secured with a security guard overnight. And if a challenger from the Republican Party or any party that's legally entitled to be there, they should be allowed to be present also. Not in the building necessarily, but at one entrance door and one entrance door only to that particular room.
I mean, after all, we want transparency.
What would you try to hide?
Well, that's a big question. Okay, so let's back up a little bit. So when it dawned on you that it's a good idea to keep a check on the county clerk's office to see if they're actually verifying the information under the security flap, you went over there to challenge them or to oversee what happened at that point?
I did. And on the evening of the 20th of 10/20, I went over to the clerk's office at 1645 with a written appointment documentation, and I presented it, and it was turned in. And after many minutes, it was returned to me, stating that I could not and would not be permitted to participate in any part of the observation of the absentee ballots that were being processed in the clerk's office. So at this point, I requested to speak to Lindsay Bachman, who was the acting clerk.
Deputy clerk.
Yes. So at 4:52, Mr. Perez came out to the reception window and told me he was going to go check on the election code to see if I was allowed in.
Well, you would think they would know what the code does and does not allow.
You would hope. So at 17:05 or 5:05, Mr. Perez returned to the reception window and asked me to leave. At this point, I asked to speak with Lindsay Bachman. At 17:10, Andy came back to the reception window again, and in the meantime, a security guard had just happened to walk in. I think this was just pure coincidence. To tell him, and when Andy came back, he told me I had to leave the building and I couldn't observe any part of the election code per section 1-2-26 process in his office. And that's the part of the code that keeps a challenger from seeing any part of the Social Security number. And it used to be the year of birth. So this is part of what SB4 changed. So that's another little wrinkle that,
okay, let's talk about this logically. The last 4 digits of a Social Security number, when I sign people up as a voter registration agent, they tell me what their last 4 digits are, or they write them down. This isn't something that you couldn't see, that you would steal their identity, because it's not the whole Social Security number.
That's correct.
So this SB4 was written, I believe, intentionally to keep observers like yourself away from the process so they could do whatever shenanigans they want. So, folks, this is not a clean operation by a far shot.
It's certainly not transparent.
Okay, well, I mean, isn't that what we want in fair elections? And I'm a Republican, and that's part of the reason why I'm a Republican, because you do not get a fair election when it comes to the Democratic Party in Doñana County, and I can only speak for that. And I've had run-ins with Amanda Askin, Lindsay Bachman, and Mr. Perez. So, okay. Dan, after you were ejected from there, then you were now back at you were ejected from that place.
Correct.
Then you went back to the warehouse, I guess, to do your duties? Okay.
Yes, I just continued on because I really wanted to see the front end of the operation, because when the envelopes are delivered to us in the ballot boxes, and they are sealed, and there is an inventory sheet signed by the clerk and everyone, when they bring them over, we take those, I say we, the presiding judge and her 2 judges take those out, verify the count is correct, then they sign off on that inventory sheet. The boxes are actually held up to show that they're empty to all the clerks and to the challengers or anyone else that's there. They're closed and taken back to the clerk's office for additional ballots to be processed and put in to deliver the same day, later in the day, or the next day.
Okay, well, we got to take a short break. Time flies, folks, but we got a lot to cover. But we'll be back in a very short while after some commercial breaks, and we'll discuss further the, what would you say, the unfairness of our election system at this point. See you in a minute.
Horizon Granite is here. We'll come to you to customize your kitchen and bathroom with beautiful countertops and cabinets. Find out more at horizongranite.com. Call us at 575-650-3180.
Horizon Granite is here.
It's here.
Make yourself a beautiful home.
Hi, I'm Ray Bamberg with Here on Earth. I would like to invite you for a free hearing evaluation to our office. We've been here in southern New Mexico for 34 years helping people hear better.
They've stormed beaches and freed countries. They've raised our flag and our hope. They've been called leathernecks. They've been called devil dogs. But above all, they're called Marines.
Hi folks, welcome back to We the People. I'm Dave Gallus, your host, former, candidate for Senate District 37, and it's not been determined yet whether I won or not, because we're not happy with the elections, the way they were, tabulated, absentee ballots in particular. And our special guest today is Dan Parrott, who was one of the, infamous ejectees from the county canvassing board for absentee ballots. First, he was thrown out of the county clerk's office because he wanted to oversee whether or not the clerk was doing the job right. And now Dan is back in the warehouse to check the absentee balloting at the warehouse. So Dan, could you give us a little, just a quick summation of what happened at the warehouse and things you saw that were not kosher?
In general, the seals were very hard to see. As the process went on and more ballot boxes were filled and stacked into the area where they had to store them, it became impossible to see the seals and to verify them on a daily basis. At the end of the day, then in the morning when we would return, a lot of the seals were being taken off before we could verify that they were still attached to the containers, and then we would sometimes be able to see the seal number and match it up to the previous evening. So in general, that was one of my big concerns. The other thing that goes on there, the ballots come in, they verify the name, the voter ID, and the last four numbers on the envelope. They have no list. The clerks have no way to verify those four numbers are correct because they're not shown the list either that comes from the clerk's office.
Now these last four numbers, is that the Social Security number?
That is the last four digits of the voter's Social Security number. It could be any four numbers on there. We had no way. The challengers, the clerks, or no one else in the warehouse processing these ballots had no way to verify that they were correct. We had to take the word of the clerk. And that's, to me, is not acceptable. It should be transparent across the board from start to finish.
Now, it used to be that there were observers when the seal was taken off, not at the county clerk's office, but at some location, I guess. But there were observers allowed. But with this SB4, this new bill that legislation passed, and I'm sure it was okayed by the Secretary of State and certainly sanctioned by our county clerk's office, that only the county clerk would be able to see this without observers, which is, to me, that is the weak spot right there, because they could corrupt it. And this isn't an accusation. This is a possibility that we should consider. And why wouldn't they want observers to make sure that all voters would be satisfied that it's a fair election? And again, I'm going to ask my producer to put up on the screen, Chris, if you could, the third world country voting where the woman is in line, and you could tell they're poor people, and she has a card in her hand. And in that card, it is her voter identification. They can do that there. They should be able to do it here. Don't tell me that, oh, it's going to suppress the vote. No, it's going to ensure a fair vote. Everybody should be happy.
And nowhere in this country can you do business. If you go to a doctor's office, a pharmacy to pick up drugs, to get your license plates for your vehicles, whatever you do, a picture ID is required.
Absolutely.
Almost nothing is done without a picture ID.
Of course. I mean, you have to have an ID to get Social Security. You have to have an ID, I'm sure.
Banks, any place you do business.
Medicare card, welfare, to accept your welfare, to get your welfare that's necessary for some folks. You know, it's ridiculous to think that we can't do that. We can do it. And it's just up to us to push for it and push our legislators to do that. So you come in one of the last days, I think it was, and what happened just before you got ejected?
About 2 weeks in or so, things just kept getting harder and harder for us to observe and to be able to see and do what we needed to do to make sure everything was correct. The day they actually started tabulating the ballots, running them through the machine to score them, we could see no who voted for who or nothing like that. It was strictly a number, a sheet going through the machine.
No personal identification.
No personal ID on the ballots whatsoever.
Right.
A group of cones, traffic cones, were set up approximately 6 feet back from the tabulators where the presiding judge was feeding in the ballots. Okay. I was able to work that entire day in close proximity with the judge and the presiding judge while she was doing this. There was absolutely no issue. The next morning we come in, and there is a black duct tape stripe on the floor approximately another foot back.
So that's 7 feet away now.
Approximately 7 feet away. I didn't measure it, but
Yeah.
that's close. And the cones were also moved back. Well, at that point, I was told I couldn't step across the tape, and that just wasn't acceptable.
Did they give you a reason why?
I asked for the code that told me I could not do do my job, or not step across the line in close proximity. They couldn't produce it, or didn't produce it.
I'm thinking, what could be the possible reasons for not wanting a legal observer, a legal certified observer that was okayed by the Secretary of State to observe? What is the sense in having an observer?
None. We were being suppressed and not able to do our job.
All right, I hear you. You know, and this doesn't happen just locally. It turns out that I want folks to go to One American News Network. Now, you want real news, you go to OANN or Newsmax, but One American News Network is running a story, and it's about the Dominion software that's nationwide. Dominion machines are in question. In Michigan, let's see, they found 2.7 million Trump votes that were deleted, 1 million in Pennsylvania alone. Data says 221,000 PA votes switched from Trump to Biden on these Dominion machines. Dominion, the stockholders in Dominion, some of them, two are George Soros and Nancy Pelosi. Now guess what machines we have, tabulators we have in Doñana County? Dominion machines. So like I said, I could have won my election. I wouldn't know. So, you know, the point is that people have to be realistic about what's going on. And we are not getting a fair count. And our county clerk's office is not legitimate. So, let's see. In Michigan, we have witnesses were dismissed. Republican witnesses were dismissed. Observers, I assume. Like yourself. Challengers. So, folks, you got to see that this is not a fair election. And I would tell my Democratic friends, do you really want to be part of this corruption? Are you really happy with your party that causes this kind of stuff? You know, to my independent friends, you better wake up too. And the Republicans that don't get out and vote, why aren't you voting? You know, this is the problem. I do remember, I met a fellow when I was out knocking on doors, and he said, I'm a Republican, but I'm not going to vote. I said, sir, your vote is so important. He said, it doesn't matter. And I told him at the time, I understand how you feel. And now I look back and think he's absolutely right. If there's corruption in our election system, we could work our tails off. Everybody could work their tails off to try and get elected, to represent the people honestly, but we're not getting elected because there's corruption in the election system.
Exactly.
We have checks and balances, observers, challengers. We have poll workers, and there's a lot of poll workers that are coming forward throughout the nation that are stating what's been going on. Some very close friends of mine just told me about how people are actually coming in and reading from their phone when asked what their name and address is. Do you really need to read your name and address from a piece of paper or your telephone? To me, that's corruption. That's a challenge-worthy event.
Absolutely. Dave, I'd say if a person don't know their name and they don't know their address, I'm not sure they're smart enough to vote.
Well,
and that's I don't mean to be condescending, but honestly, if you've got to look on a piece of paper or your phone to read off your name and address to get a sheet to vote on, there's a problem.
Yeah, but I think the problem is that's not the person.
Yeah.
Or maybe the person's died some years ago. I heard Mark Stein on the radio filling in for Rush Limbaugh, and he was saying, it's amazing. We have voters that are 130 years old.
Yeah.
That is amazing in the U.S. So, Dan, there's probably, you got 1,000,001 things you'd like to say, so go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of things to wrap up. In arranging the locked and sealed ballot boxes in a way that prevented us from recording and matching the seal numbers on them, what's the purpose in that? The law states that we have the right to do our job and intrude with a minimum amount of effect on the counting of the absentee ballots. It's very plain. We're not to stop the process, but we're entitled to some due amount of respect to be able to get the job done. Sure. And in putting up the orange cones and the black tape What does that benefit? The day prior to that, we worked shoulder to shoulder without a single issue, and it just makes me feel like the clerk's office from day one was tightening the clamp down every day to prevent us from being able to observe and document what was going on, Dave.
You know, being a former cop, I kind of think, okay, I'm always suspicious. Now, could they possibly have been egging you on to cross the line or cross a line to a point where they might have justification in ejecting you? And if they did, what happened during that time when you were ejected and finally new people came in to observe?
I have no clue, but they did accomplish what they meant to do in my mind, because when they moved the line back another foot and said, you can't cross it, I said, that's it. That's the limit. I'm crossing it, and I did.
Well, you should have had some backup. We should have had lawyers there backing you up immediately, whether by phone or in person. We should have had our county chairman or representatives in mass to come in there and say, whoa, stop the presses here. This is unconstitutional. We're not getting a fair election, and that's what it's going to take.
I agree. And the one thing I regret is getting the other three challengers thrown out with myself.
But they didn't.
Because, and two of them did not do anything.
Right.
There was another gentleman that did step across the line because he was very hard of hearing. He was there trying to take notes while Mr. Perez and I were having a rather lively discussion, if you will. And at that point, I asked to speak to Miss Bachman, and I asked him to go get her. So he was gone for quite some time, and when Miss Bachman returned, she returned with the sheriff and a deputy, and the four of us, the four challengers for the Republican side, were asked to leave, and I asked why. And I was told that we were hindering the process and being a disturbance to the operations.
No, you were doing your job. Well, look, Dan, we're out of time. You're going to have to come back again, maybe for part 2 if you have the time. So,
sure.
Folks, we're trying to make it a fair and honest election for every party, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Constitutional. It doesn't matter. We want fair elections, and we'll have them. We just got to keep up the fight. Okay, so I'll see you next week, and it'll be part 2 of election fraud. Take care and see you then. Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.